Well, all right then. I deserve bliss. I think that sounds like an excellent idea. Thanks to all of our kind and generous business underwriters for underwriting all hours of programming here at KFUG Crescent City, 101.1 on your FM radio dial, worldwide on the internet, kfugradio.org. 6 minutes past the top of the hour. That hour is 12 noon, which is a different time for me being on the radio. And that is because this is the premiere of KFUG's Public Process. I'm your host, Mike Thornton. We'll be doing this weekly public affairs program from now, heading forward into the future. At least I hope. It's a long future. We'll find out. We had our first guest in the 11 o'clock hour, Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Mintzel, and I am now very happy, very pleased to be joined by regional editor of the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot newspapers, Robin Fornoff. Robin, thank you so much for being with us on KFUG's Public Process today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Let me ask you to maybe come a little bit closer to that mic. Okay. You know, and yeah, we'll work it out. We'll juggle it around. We'll make it work. You know, so Robin, as we were talking off air, I have a bit of a background in journalism myself, and so I love the opportunity to talk with someone who has as much experience in all of this as you do. So let's start out with, who's Robin Fornoff? Where'd he come from? What did he do? And how did he wind up here?
Let's see. I grew up in northern Michigan, and I went to college there. And the local newspaper, Cadillac, Michigan, offered me money to actually write. So I took a job and went from there. I spent a lot of my career in Detroit as a political reporter for the Detroit Free Press, which is the largest newspaper in the state. And then there was a strike in '95, and I refused to cross the picket line. So
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you know Damon Hartley?
Yes, I know Damon.
Okay.
I was on strike with him.
Okay, no.
And I know and his wife Margaret.
Okay.
I know the whole crew.
I know Damon from some past interactions. So anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
in Central America.
So let's talk about the strike. Talk about the strike.
I just couldn't bring myself to cross the picket line, and so wound up actually helping on the strike newspaper. It took him about a year to get it together. It was crazy. And then shortly after that, I took a job with ABC, the ABC affiliate in Detroit, which is, I'd never been on TV, but as a chief, eventually became the chief investigative producer. We did long-form pieces meant to drive during ratings. Later went over to CBS and did the same thing, did a three-part series on basically indentured servitude. This big landscaping corporation was bringing in Mexicans under visas, and basically they were paying them minimum wage, then deducting most of it for things that they needed, like
Sure.
boots and work clothes and stuff. And we did a three-part series on that, and eventually the state stepped in and stopped them. And anyway, then my parents were getting up there, and they needed some help, so I took a little time off and went up there, back up in northern Michigan, and stayed with them for about a year and got things straightened around financially and legally. And decided, well, now what am I going to do? So one of the paper that I started asked me to part-time cover government meetings, and I said, oh, sure, be good for a little extra cash. So I did that for a while, and then I got a call from the editor of what was then a freedom newspaper in Clovis, New Mexico, and took a job as managing editor there. of the 2 dailies, one in Clovis, one in Portales, which is about 20 miles south, and then twice weekly in Tucumcari. Anyway, got remarried, and the wife was not keen on the High Plains Desert, heart of the Dust Bowl. She didn't like. So Cindy Vosberger used to be the publisher at the Triplicate, recruited me to come out here, and I brought Joni out with me, and we took one look around and said, this is probably going to be our last move. Why not move to Paradise? So here we are 4 years later. And with all the love it here. We've got a place out in Smith River, which is nice since they made me the editor of the pilot in Brookings here about 1.5 years ago. So it's kind of nice that it's sort of halfway in between. So, anyways, that's why we're here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're speaking with Robin Fornoff, who's the regional editor for the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot newspapers. You're tuned to KFUG, Crescent City. I'm Mike Thornton. This is Public Process. So, Robin, I'd like to go back a little bit, talk a little bit about being a political reporter at a big city newspaper.
Yes.
And then also talk a little bit about doing long-form investigative journalism.
Yes,
So what was that like doing political reporting at a big city newspaper?
Well, I was covering Macomb County, which is the heart of the Reagan Democrats. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but the Macomb County is largely folks who work on the lines and for the big three, and the UAW, the union, was supporting Reagan's. I don't even recall who Reagan's was running against. But anyways, the workers bucked the union and voted for Reagan. That turned the whole political spectrum in the country. When working folks started voting for Republicans, when it used to be the other way around. Anyway.
What do you think changed?
I think what changed is that time back in the early 80s, the Democrats were just too far left for ordinary folks. I think most folks are sort of middle of the road, and I think that's what did it. Yeah. So
some people are saying that that's a problem that perhaps the Democratic Party is going to face in 2020.
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I really don't like politics.
Okay. Let's stick to journalism.
Let's stick to journalism.
We'll do that.
Something I know something
okay.
about.
So so you were doing this political reporting for in Detroit.
Yes.
During this time when you were seeing these shifts. So what kind of stories were you covering at that time, and what were you trying to accomplish by doing that kind of journalism?
Oh, one of the things I did at the Free Press, I was part of a team. State of Michigan had like all states, had overloaded prisons, and the parole board had an unwritten policy, one in, one out, and they were releasing violent folks from prison who were out recommitting murder, rape, that sort of thing. And so we spent about 6 months documenting all this, doing stories, and ran with a series that we won some big award, Bar Journal Silver Gavel Award over it. But what it did was changed, the legislature changed how the parole board operated, put all new people on there, changed the policy so that wasn't happening again. That's one of the things that we did, but it was that kind of stuff. It was fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, isn't that sort of the dream of every journalist on some level, is to be doing stories that actually
make a difference?
Make a difference, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, after I think I told you I would spend a short time working for Fox.
Yes.
In Detroit, helping produce a morning show, and it was just awful. It was like I said, it was get the chopper up for the worst accident the bloodiest accident on the freeways, or make sure that whatever celebrity was in town was in the green room and ready to go on the little chitty chat stuff. And I said, yeah, this is not why I got into journalism. So I left there, and in the interim, somebody was looking for work, and somebody said that, well, the Democrats are looking for somebody to work at the legislature in Lansing. And so I went to interview the guy, and the guy was a former reporter with the Oakland Press, which is a daily newspaper in Oakland County, which is the northern suburbs of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And he asked me why I had stayed in newspapers so long, and I said, because once in a while you get to do a story that actually brings about some good, makes for change, for the better of the community or somebody else. And I mean, that never been his experience. I was just like, wow. Anyway, that's why I've stayed with it so long, because even at this level, we're a much smaller circulation newspaper here in Crescent City and in Brookings. Where every once in a while we get to do something that benefits a person or the community as a whole.
I'd like to talk with you specifically about doing that kind of work and running newspapers and doing journalism in smaller rural areas like this. Mm-hmm. I guess one of the things that I'm thinking about at the moment is, how has journalism changed from the time where we had, I grew up in Chicago. I think they might have had 3-4 daily newspapers at that time, big newspapers, and then a number of smaller ones. And as all of that has kind of changed and gone away, the expectations and pressures on newspapers and journalism as a whole has really changed. As we were talking off air, there's news, and then there's this sort of mishmash of celebrity junk that gets called news. And talk, if you will, about the differences you've seen from the Detroit Free Press days through television to here.
Oh, I think the biggest thing is the how advertising has fallen off. Before the internet, especially newspapers were basically little monopolies, and they made money, made a lot of money, but now they don't. And I saw some of that falling off in TV, which used to have to. When I was in television in Detroit, they were making a 50% profit, and they were losing out to cable TV and things, and then the internet came along, and they had cutbacks. But yeah, the change in the loss of advertising dollars. And I don't think a lot of people understand, especially about newspapers, that we don't. That's how we make our money. We don't get paid tax dollars or anything. In fact, we're the antithesis of that. We are the watchdogs who keep an eye on how your tax dollars get spent. We have to make a profit. I was discouraged. One of the things I've learned is in the 4 years that I've been here as the editor of a small newspaper is restraint.
Say more.
And I'll give you an example of that.
Okay.
We had this just north between Brookings and Gold Beach. The 101 is washed out.
Right.
It's sliding into the ocean. And we, in situations like that, when it's immediate, presents some kind of danger, possible danger to somebody, we will post our stories on our website and then put it on Facebook. But if it's an emergency like this, if their lives being threatened, right, could possibly, we just copy and paste the story on Facebook. We don't put the link where you have to go and pay to look on the website. But that had been going like 3 or 4 days, and we had just done an update story. Everybody knew what was going on. People were out there making sure nobody got hurt, and I posted the link on Facebook to our website, and the first comment is like, I guess you have to pay to read this. And then there was another comment from some guy who's with the radio station in Gold Beach, assailing us for our lack of public service because we were actually making you subscribe $5 a month to read this. Well, let me tell you, the reporter who wrote that story, and this emergency was over with, we were just updating people. The reporter who wrote that story worked until 11 o'clock the night before, and then got up at 6 in the morning and spent 2 hours writing that story so we could get it up online. You don't think that didn't cost money? We don't pay our reporters a lot, but I'm telling you, I look at that budget. It costs money, and people, I think they just are. I don't know what they think, and that's how it operates. We make most of our money off advertising. That's declined, so we've had to shift it over into raising subscription prices, which when I started in this business almost 50 years ago, we'd give papers away.
Right.
You know, you only wanted paid circulation, so that's how you base your advertising on rates on. You know, it's guaranteed X amount of people will read this, therefore the rate is this. But we've had to get out of that, change it, simply to keep operating. Now, I've been here 4 years. Every year, I have to cut. The last 2 years, we've lost reporters in both newsrooms. I'm sorry, not this year. This year, we lost 2 key editors in cutbacks, and that's simply to balance the budget and continue to make money and continue to be here. Because if we cease to make money, the newspapers will cease to be here. And I don't think any of us wants to see that.
Well, no, that's incredibly dangerous. It's not just, I mean, sure, everybody would like to hold on to their job, but it's more than that. It's incredibly dangerous. And I'd like us to speak more about that in a minute. We're joined on Public Process today by Robin Fornoff, who's the regional editor for the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot newspapers. I'm really happy that Robin is joining us in the 12 o'clock hour today. So, Robin, I want to get to the importance of local news coverage, but I'm thinking about a couple of things. Correct me if I'm wrong or if I have some sort of romanticized, version of all of this. The business model that newspapers in particular are operating under has changed so radically, as you were saying. Yes. It makes it really, really difficult. At the same time, I'm thinking of, what I think of in terms of the golden age of journalism, and most of the names I'm going to say are related to television, of course, with, Murrow and Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and Mike Royko and Herb Cain and all of these other folks and, the Watergate guys, Bernstein, and I can't think of the other one at the moment. But so am I romanticizing that journalism? Has the quality in general of journalism declined? If so, is it largely or exclusively due to the financial pressures that these news organizations find themselves under when perhaps in the past losing money, particularly for some of these corporate connected ones, was not as big a deal? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I don't think the quality of journalism has declined. In fact, I think if anything, it's gotten better as far as vetting information and being fair. But what you lose is every time you lose a person is, for example, here we've had to. When I first got here 4 years ago, we had 4 reporters. And we were staffing virtually every important public meeting every time they met. We've had to cut back on that. And I've had to consciously say, let's check what our sources with the school board. If they're not going to really do anything, then we won't go there because your time is better spent on this other issue, whether it be, you know, this horrendous murder we just had. Anyway, yeah, it's we now have 2 reporters, Tony Reed and Jessica Saynar, who are wonderful, very, very good reporters. Mike Zog, our sports editor, is one of the best folks I've ever worked with. He just does incredible stuff. But you can only stretch so far, you know. So yeah, it's the loss of people that's hurting us. Yeah, I don't know.
No, and it's important, and it's important, I think, for a number of reasons, but one in particular that we had touched on a bit. So I want to say this the way I really mean it, at least try. I think covering, you know, the horrendous murder, it deserves to be covered. It deserves to be covered with, you know, attention to detail, quality, sensitivity, compassion, all of those things.
Yes.
And at the same time, the things that are going on in the community that are less dramatic are the things that these financial pressures are making it more difficult to cover.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
I mean, it's one of the things, like I talk to people and I say to them, you have no idea how much public money is being spent just within the consent calendar, right? At a public meeting, right?
Exactly.
And most of us do not have the time or the expertise to be able to stay on top of that kind of stuff. Right. And if we don't have local journalists, whether it be newspaper or radio or whatever, and I think there's different roles, that is dangerous for a community and dangerous for democracy.
Yeah.
As in general, right?
I totally agree with you. They call them news deserts now. What has there been, like 300 newspapers that have just up and closed in the last 10 years or so, and it's going to continue until we figure out how to come up with a better model to make more money. Now, here's an example. The Philadelphia Inquirer now is a nonprofit. It was interesting because I was having a conversation with my doctor, who knows nothing about newspapers, and was wondering why I was so stressed out and why my blood pressure was up so high. And I was telling him what was going on, and he's like, "Well, it doesn't make sense." I said, "What doesn't make sense?" He says, "If what you're doing is so important for the community, why don't you restructure yourself into being a nonprofit? You still make money. The only thing with a nonprofit is you have to take those profits and pay them out by the end of the year when you file with IRS. You
right.
know, the perfect example of a nonprofit that makes a ton of money is Sutter Coast Hospital. You know, but he says, the doctor says, excuse me, it just doesn't make sense that if you're doing this, if you're such an important part of the community, if you're doing good for the community, why you don't become a nonprofit instead of trying to cut your staff and you're not filling the need when you do it. Well, we do fill the need. I mean, I'd like to see more people, more reporters. Yeah, we could do a lot more, but we're at least there watching out. And I'll give you an example of that. When I first got to the pilot in Brookings a little over a year ago, was the Harbor Board. And they had people on who were absolutely corrupt. And the newspaper had not started digging into it. And we'd hired a new reporter, Boyd Allen, who started staffing him. And he said, "Robin, there's some real shady stuff going on here." And we started looking in it. And Boyd did a series of stories where two of the members were boyfriend girlfriend, and he had, right after he got elected, leaned on a vendor down there to cut her a deal on her monthly rent for her trinket shop. And then documented another guy who was a guide out there who was using his position to steal boat slip because it'd be more advantageous to his business. We wrote those stories. There was a recall, and every one of them were tossed out of office. Those were documented. Those were vetted. We were threatened to be sued, and we said, bring it. Never happened because it's true. It's factual.
Right.
It's not the stuff you see on Facebook that's somebody's opinion, and that's what we do.
We're talking with Robin Fornoff, regional editor for the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot newspapers. This is Public Process on KFUG Crescent City. I'm Mike Thornton. You can catch us at 101.1 on your FM radio dial or worldwide on the web, kfugradio.org. So, Robin, is there any discussion of the papers going towards a different model, a nonprofit model?
It's working in Philadelphia. I don't know that.
I was thinking more about you. Is that something that's being discussed, or?
I don't know. We're owned by Western Communications in Bend, and as you know, they've filed for bankruptcy
yes,
the
I do know
time in the last 6 or 7 years, whatever the limit is. And we're not hearing a lot other than what I read in the newspapers.
Well, we need some reporters on that story right now.
Well, it's done in Bend, Oregon, and one of the things that we don't have right now is the PACER system, which is the system federal courts use that you can go in and look at files over online. We can't afford it, so we don't have it. So I don't know what's going on in bankruptcy court unless somebody from on high tells me. And we've been kept pretty much in the dark about that.
It's got to be pretty stressful, I would think, for everyone.
Yeah, I don't have an answer. I will tell you this, and I know this from sitting through budget meetings and losing sleep in December and January over this. Both the Pilot and Brookings and the Triplicate make money. They don't make a lot of money, but they're profitable. If push comes to shove, I think somebody would buy us because there's always somebody who wants to own a newspaper, and if it's making money, then fine. You don't shut a property down, so I don't think there's any real danger of that right now. But things change. We were convinced that we would get through this last budget session without having to cut anyone in the newsroom. Kim Fowler, our publisher, was dedicated to that. And then when it came time where we had to find X amount of dollars, and when your biggest expense is salaries, that's where it goes. That's what you got to do. Well, she said, well, we're not going to cut reporters. We'll figure out how to do it with fewer people to actually physically put the pages together and put that stuff online. But we're not going to cut reporters, and so we didn't.
That's led to some of the changes that are taking place. There's
Yes.
some consolidation between the two papers.
Triplicate, which by the way got its name from the consolidation of 3 newspapers, not that it publishes 3 times a week. Triplicate is this week will be going down to twice a week instead of Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays. We'll publish Wednesdays and Saturdays. And actually, I'm kind of excited about that because it gives us a little more time to develop stories. In our features, the B section of the paper, the readers are going to get more things they like, comics and crosswords. I'm negotiating with AccuWeather now to come up with a color weather map that has. Trust me, in the last week I've learned more about weather maps than any human being should know. But that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks too. It was just a matter of getting some mock-ups together that we can check and make sure that all the information is there that we want. And so, yeah. So
this was something I was thinking about when I had heard that the Triplicate was going to cut back to 2 days a week. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm saying this in any way wrong, that I on the one hand, it makes it more challenging to do breaking news because there's less publishing.
Right.
On the other hand, though, it may open up the possibility to do more investigative long-form reporting. Is that being discussed, or am I off base with all of that?
No, it's exactly right. One of the things we're going to do, we've tried to slowly move, and we need to move faster on this, is get more stuff on the internet, on our website. And you'll see it this week. We'll have something posted on the website that says Between Editions, which will be short little synopsises of City Council met Monday night and here's what they did. The rest of the more details will be in the paper Wednesday, that sort of thing. But there's some issues that we've been, Jessica Sanar, who covers, her beat is the harbor in Crescent City, solid waste, the hospital, healthcare, that sort of thing. Education, she covers the school board too. Excuse me, and a wonderful reporter, very good, she seldom, I can't remember the last time she had to write a correction, that she, made a typo or something, I don't know. She doesn't make mistakes. Anyway, she just won a fellowship through USC, and is going to spend several weeks gathering information and eventually writing a piece about food deserts, Gasky, Hyuchi, Smith River.
Right.
Can't think of the name of the town on the side of the last chance grade.
Klamath?
Klamath.
Okay.
Klamath especially.
I have those moments too.
Yeah, it's senior moment.
Right.
Klamath, where virtually the only grocery store is the gas station.
Right.
Fast food and milk and eggs, I guess you can buy there too. Anyway, she will write. She's actually the fifth reporter that the Triplicate has had that has won this fellowship, and there's only like a dozen of them that are given out all over the state. But anyway, she will spend time on that. It'll allow us to give her the time to do that. Of course, everybody else pitches in and fills in for her, but she'll take about a month to do that and generate something probably towards the end of summer, and that'll run. Actually, we'll publish that in both the pilot and the Triplicate. So
that sounds very exciting. Yeah. We're speaking with Robin Fornoff, editor of the Coastal Pilot and Triplicate. I'm sorry, Robin, did I cut you off?
Oh no, I was just going to say that the thing about the importance of small local newspapers like us is people like Jessica are working here, who really do their job well, who know the community, has been here for years. And if you lose that, it just won't be there.
Right. That's right. Right.
It just goes away.
Well, and all of that institutional memory and context and
yes.
community connections and yes. that kind of thing, and that's a real loss, because I think a lot of what happens with journalism, well, not journalism, whatever they call some of that stuff, it's like factoid regurgitation,
Yeah.
It's like, well, factoid. Okay, all of that may be true. Mm-hmm. What does it mean?
Right. Exactly.
And what does it mean? And if I don't know what it means, it does me no good to be able to actually be a part of the community and to hold decision makers accountable.
Exactly. Yeah. As I was talking to Boyd Allen, and the reporter, and one of the reporters at the pilot yesterday, and I said, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say, but it's about the importance of local newspapers. Boyd says, well, why don't you tell them about, if we're not there to watch them, to be the watchdogs, about the crooked politicians that are going to steal money from
I'm sorry, what was that you said? I missed that.
Not all politicians are crooked. Not all politicians are crooked. I'm not saying that. But every once in a while, there's something that we run. I mean, I just gave the example up there. They cleaned house once they found out. But it took us to document that.
Right.
We've done similar stuff here. At the Triplicate.
Do you have a particular example?
I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I think he's still on the Sutter Coast Hospital Board. He was in charge of, I can't think of the name of the organization that distributes food over there by, across from Safeway.
Oh, RHS?
RHS,
Okay.
the executive director,
Right.
who was accused of sexually harassing.
Yes, I know some people who were connected to that.
Yeah. And I think it was largely our stories as a result of him finally resigning and leaving. But Jessica did a bang-up job documenting that and talking to victims, alleged victims.
And let me get to, because, you know, when you said not all politicians are crooked, of course that's true. And at the same time, I think that part of the problem, or a problem, is that people can get very insulated and they get very, you know, they lose touch with the community and the needs of the people that they're supposed to be serving. And pretty soon, you know, they're making decisions that are bad decisions, not necessarily because they're bad, crooked people, but because they've kind of lost touch and gone astray somehow, and we all need to be held accountable, because that can happen to any of us, right?
I totally agree. And one of the things that I don't know if you noticed it, our editorial board, which is Kim Fowler, our publisher, and myself, are doing roundtable discussions with. We started with Board of Supervisors Lori Cowan, who's now the chair, and published that. We have one with Blake Inscore, the mayor of Crescent City. I've just not had time to transcribe it yet. I'm about halfway through it. That'll likely be appearing this week, and we'll continue those, meeting with the school superintendent or whoever, and ask them some hard questions about this or that. You know, when's Front Street going to get fixed? What are you going to do about it, Mr. Mayor, about that impending multi-million-dollar debt on the water treatment plant that was rejected? You know, the voters rejected that consumption-based rate. And that bill is still looming out there. It's got to be paid off. How are you going to do that?
Right. You
know, those kind of questions. Right. Yeah.
Thinking in terms of things that both of the papers have covered, one of those issues, and I've been to some degree involved in it as well, is the issue of homelessness.
Yes.
Talk about coverage of homelessness and in Brookings and homelessness in Crescent City, and that the paper actually did an editorial on the subject in both of these communities.
Yes, we've done several editorials, and it was one of the first things I noticed when I came here, was the number of transient folks. It just seemed disproportionate. We'd see a few when we were in New Mexico where I was at, but nothing like the number here. And maybe the coast has something to do with it, and the moderate weather and stuff. But when I had a larger staff, we were concentrating on it. Actually, it was part of somebody's beat to actually go talk to some of these folks and figure out, you know, how they wound up there, what's their story. We've not been able to do that, but with this Ninth Circuit ruling, Court of Appeals ruling out of San Francisco, it really erupted in Brookings.
Yeah, it was really crazy.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
They had 20, 30 people camped out in the library parking lot, and then at night these vigilante types are going by, throwing things, shouting at them. It's just, if it wasn't for the police and the sheriff over there, how they handled it very professionally, someone would have gotten hurt. I mean, somebody was egging for a fight, and it was just crazy. Fortunately, it didn't turn into that as much here in Crescent City. But our editorial said, you know, this went on for weeks. Somebody has to make a decision. You were elected to lead. Let's lead. Let's make a decision. Let's come up with some rules and end this before somebody gets hurt. So there was some effect from it. They actually in Brookings, the library board did come up with some rules under the advice of their attorney that basically they were gone, can't camp there. But it's a difficult issue, homelessness, and it's something I've always said it's one of the top issues here, because if you're going to be a community based on tourism income, folks aren't going to drive 6 hours from San Francisco and see the same thing they just left. They're just going to keep on going.
Right.
And plus, it's not. You and I have discussed this. It's when did we as a society accept that this is okay, that somebody sleeps in the woods in the rain, that doesn't have a home? I mean, it's a disappointment that we accept this and haven't made it a priority to try and eliminate it. And there are a number of reasons for why somebody's homeless, and degrees of homelessness. But I think a lot of folks underestimate the impact on a community. So.
What are some of the other, if not big stories, important stories from your perspective that are going on in this community that most of us don't really know about?
I don't know. Most of you don't really know about it. It would be the harbor. What's going on down there? And one of the things Mayor Inscore had discussed with us in this meeting a couple of weeks ago that will be in the paper was the plans the city has for Beachfront Park to make it more of the kind of place like you see in Brookings down in the harbor in the summertime, with all the different music festivals and art festivals and things. There are a lot of plans out there to do that. Some of the bigger stories. Let's see. Let me think.
Well, maybe bigger isn't the right word. Maybe important is the right word.
Important. The harbor, Beachfront Park. I think school board. I'm trying to think, supervisors, what they're up to.
Well, that's always a good question. We should know what they're up to, right?
Yeah. Well, and there's always last chance grade, and when's that going to be fixed? Probably not anytime soon, but we've kept pressure with stories and editorials on the need. Our editorial position always has been since I've been here. It needs to be fixed yesterday.
Right.
Some of that I think has pushed State Senator Mike McGuire and others, Hoffman, the congressman, where they finally came up with some more money to do the environmental studies that have to be done in California. You can't avoid these. You can't just say, well, let's just no, and then you'll lose. You'll wind up with the bad situation like we have on 189. There's an accident out there a week,
right? A
serious accident out there a week, and they started the process of widening it without getting the environmental folks on board, and got sued, and there it sits. And it's a dangerous road, and will remain a dangerous road for a lot of years because they didn't do it right. So you got to do it right. But at least they got some more money, and the pressure's still on, and we won't let it up. That has to be fixed.
Well, and as we've already said in a couple of different ways, one of the most important roles of local journalism is to make sure that there's a light on these things so they do get done as right as possible, so the public doesn't wind up having to pay the price for bad or broken or at times corrupt decisions that get made.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Robin Fornoff, regional editor for the Triplicate and the Coastal Pilot. This is KFUG's Public Process. I'm Mike Thornton. So, Robin, let me ask you, because it's one of the things that I've seen and I've experienced that happens in communities like this, is that it all gets really personal at times. You know?
Yeah.
And so talk about dealing with the challenges of that. I know I particularly, hear they won't print my letter, because they're this or they're that.
Well, yeah.
Talk about all of that and the challenges of how it gets so personal so quickly in a small community like this.
Well, it does. I've been accused of being a Democrat. I've been accused of being a right-wing conservative. I am registered as no party preference at the county clerk's office at the voter registration. I've heard this. Well, you won't print my letter. Well, for an example, you write the paper a 300-word letter on the evils of Burger King because you paid for onion rings and when you got home they weren't there. We're not going to publish that story. We don't publish consumer complaints. Right. Otherwise, we just don't. No newspaper does. If you, and I blame television, these CNN and MSNBC, Fox, these 24-hour stations where they fill the air with somebody's opinion, and whoever says the nastiest thing gets the most airtime. And I think over the years it has taught people have learned it, that maybe that's the way you argue with something. I mean, you will get these letters to the editor who are attacking a person, and I can't tell you the number of times I've called a writer and said, first of all, we don't allow personal attacks on private individuals. If you're elected to office, you're fair game, but not because I didn't like what John Smith wrote in that letter. John Smith is this and John Smith is that. I said, and I'll tell him. I said, I'll ask him. Would you say that to that person's face? Well, probably not. No. Well, here's how you do it. You say, I don't like what John Smith said. Here's why, and go through the reasons. That's a valid argument, and we'll publish that. But just to go after somebody because you don't like them or you don't like the way they feel about an issue, that's not going to get published. I think that's fair. I think it encourages more people to write. There's some politicians here and in Brookings who feel they've been treated unfairly. Well, you're always going to have that. But I will tell you, for the most part, we've bent over backwards to be fair to these folks. You have to be incredible. One of the things that I started when I got here is if we make a mistake, we write a correction. If we make a factual error, we write a correction, and we don't try to hide it inside the paper. We put it right on page 1. And we don't make excuses. We just say, we made this error. Here are the facts. Boom. But yeah, I've been attacked. I'm not going to get into Mr. Gitlin and his stuff.
Mr.
So he made it very public. He did. I did.
No. I've had my my conversations and confrontations with Mr. Gitlin as well. So I can understand that.
Roger does some good things.
Absolutely.
His attempts to clean up the community of trash. We've always supported those. I've always given him plenty of ink and plenty of, if he sends in a picture, we'll run it because it's important. It's important. So I don't want it to seem like one-sided.
Right. No, I totally get that.
But it's a fact that he went very public with demanding my resignation.
Oh yeah, no, I know. Yeah, he does that. We're going to have to get Mr. Gitlin on one of the future shows and have a long discussion about those kinds of things. I think it'll be very interesting because I interact with him on a fair amount, and most of the time we're okay, and every so often it just gets testy because we have different ideas about things.
There you go.
Yeah. So we've been joined by Robin Fornoff, regional editor for the Triplicate and Coastal Pilot newspapers. Robin, any parting words for our audience? And let me also say I'm really grateful that you came on the premiere of this program, and that I'm hoping that you'll be able to come on again in the future. But any thoughts for our audience?
Oh, I would say buy a subscription.
Shameless promotion. I love it.
If you're a local business person, buy an ad. I guess I'd like to say, whether you agree with me or agree that we're fair or not, I'd like to hear from you. If I'm not at the pilot office in Brookings, I'm at the office at the Triplicate in Crescent City, usually 6 days a week. And I always return phone calls. I always return emails. I don't, and I enjoy a good conversation, even though we may feel differently about things. That's part of it. That's one of the things why I've no plans to ever retire, unless I'm forced to, is that this job has never failed. I'm always learning something new in this job, and most of that is interacting with folks who either they're complaining or they're suggesting ways of doing things. We're very open to that. So,
Robin Fornoff, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.